Hello, everybody. We are just glimpsing outside. We're entering back into this George MacDonald book. I think we're gonna be wrapping it up. I just am not outside at the moment, and so I'll just put it up here. George MacDonald was C.S. Lewis's spiritual mentor. Let me see if I have my C.S. Lewis book. I'm reading Surprised by Joy right now, but we're not reading that book today because this is free copyright. Lewis said that every book he ever wrote, he quoted either directly or indirectly George MacDonald, and so I love him, and usually I am out hiking in nature and I bring the book in my backpack, but today we were packing bags at the church for people that need food. And so, anyway, I'm not trying to virtue signal, I'm just saying, so it was, I didn't get to do my regular hiking, and so I'm doing it now because I like putting these out once a week. And then let me set this down. Okay, we're on chapter LVI, the Laird and the Preacher. All right, since he came to town, Gibbie had seen Ginevra but once. That was in the North Church. I forgot I can sit way back because I've got this mic on right here. And so I don't have to be right in front of the camera. Usually I do that for the, so that you can hear me. Okay. She looked so sad and white that his heart was very heavy for her. Could it be that she repented? She must have done it to please her father. If she would marry Donald, he would engage to give her Glashruach. Okay, so just so you know a little bit, Ginevra's father speculated his money away, and he owned this giant property called Glashruach. And so Gibbie is this mute boy that had nothing. He grew up with like rags, and his father died from whiskey, from drinking too much. His mom was pretty well-to-do, but she died close after his childbirth or when he was very young. So anyway, Donald's another character in the book. You can listen to the other stuff. So just trust that you're here. I always say, like, these teachings, they speak into our lives right now. And so just listen to whatever God is speaking to you through this story from the 1800s that George MacDonald wrote. Lewis said never has he met any author closer to the Spirit of God or the Spirit of Christ than George MacDonald. And so I welcome all faiths, but it's just so amazing, the insights that come obviously from the Narnia books, but also from George MacDonald's books. And this is one of them. Okay. So Gibbie had bought Glashruach with his estate money that he got all this money from a distant relative that died and left it to him. But he would give it to Ginevra if she wouldn't marry this horrible guy. Anyway, but she should have Glashruach all the same, whatever she did, only it might influence her father. He paced up and down before the cottage once for a whole night, but no good came of that. He paced before it from dusk to bedtime again and again in the poor hope of a chance of speaking to Ginevra. But he never saw even her shadow on the white blind. He went up to the door once, but in the dread of displeasing her, lost his courage and paced the street the whole morning instead, but saw no one come out. Fergus had gradually become essential to the small remaining happiness of which the Laird was capable. The Laird was the old Laird, which is Ginevra's father, he gambled the money away, basically. He had gained his favor chiefly through the respect and kindly attention he showed him. The young preacher knew little of the Laird's career and looked upon him as an unfortunate man, towards whom loyalty now required even a greater show of respect than while he owned his father's farm. So, yeah, he was the Laird of the land, the lord of that property before, and Donald's father was renting a farm that belonged to this guy before he gambled it away. The impulse transmitted to him from the devotion of ancestors to the patriarchal head of the clan had found blind vent in the direction of the mere feudal superior, and both the impulse and its object remain. He felt honored even now that he had reached the goal of his lofty desires and was a popular preacher, in being permitted to play backgammon with the great man, or to carve a chicken, while the now trembling hands, enfeebled far more through anxiety and disappointment than from age, found themselves unequal to the task. The laird had begun to tell long stories and drank twice as much as he did a year ago. He was sinking in more ways than one. Fergus at length summoned courage to ask him if he might pay his addresses to Miss Galbraith. The old man started, cast on him a withering look, murmured, "The heiress of Glashruach?" But then he's going to realize she's not the heiress of anything because he speculated it away. He said something like that. Remembered, threw himself back in his chair and closed his eyes. Fergus, on the other side of the table, sat erect, a dice box in his hand, waiting a reply, right, for backgammon. The father reflected that if he declined what he could not call an honor, he must lose what was unquestionably a comfort. How was he to pass all the evenings of the week without the preacher? On the other hand, if he accepted him, he might leave the miserable cottage and go to the manse. From a moral point of view, that was, from the point of other people's judgment of him, it would be of consequence to have a clergyman for a son-in-law. Slowly he raised himself in his chair, opened his unsteady eyes, which rolled and pitched like boats on a choppy sea, and said solemnly, "You have my permission, Mr. Duff." Oof. The young preacher hastened to find Ginevra, but only to meet a refusal, gentle and sorrowful. He pleaded for permission to repeat his request after an interval, but she distinctly refused. She did not, however, succeed in making a man with such a large opinion of himself hopeless. Unfortunately, right? Disappointed and annoyed he was, but he sought and fancied he found reasons for her decision which were not unfavorable to himself, and continued to visit her father as before, saying to him he had not quite succeeded in drawing from her a favorable answer, but hoped to prevail. He nowise acted the despairing lover, but made grander sermons than ever, and as he came to feel at home in the pulpit, delivered them with growing force. But delay wrought desire in the laird, and at length one evening, having by cross-questioning satisfied himself that Fergus made no progress, he rose and, going to his desk, handed him Donald's verses. Donald just wrote one letter, sent it without signing it. Fergus read them and remarked he had read better, but the first stanza had a slight flavor of Shelley, right, the poet Shelley. "I don't care a straw about their merit or demerit," said Mr. Galbraith. "Poetry is nothing but spoilt prose. What I want to know is whether they do not suggest a reason for your want of success with Jenny. Do you know the writing?" "I cannot say I do, but I think it is very likely that of Donald Grant. He sets up for the Burns of Daurside." "Insolent scoundrel!" cried the laird, bringing down his fist on the table and fluttering the wine-glass. "Next to superstition, I hate romance. With my whole heart I do." And something like a flash of cold moonlight on wintered water gleamed over rather than shot from his poor, focusless eyes. "But, my dear sir," said Fergus, "if I am to understand these lines, yes, if you are to understand where there is no sense whatever, I think I understand them, if you will excuse me for venturing to say so, and what I read in them is that whoever this writer may be, the lady, whomever she may be, had refused him." "You cannot believe that the wretch had the impudence to make my daughter the heiress of at least What? Make my daughter an offer, right? An offer of marriage. Because his father didn't rent the farm. This guy, Donald, his father raised sheep up on the mountain, and this guy watched the cows, right? So he just looks at him in a class system, even though he went to college and he's a studied man now. Anyway, she would at once have acquainted me with the fact that she might receive suitable chastisement. Let me look at the stuff again. It is quite possible, said Fergus. It may be quite only a poem some friend had copied for her from a newspaper. While he spoke, the laird was reading the lines and persuading himself he understood them, which obviously. With sudden resolve, the paper held torch-like in front of him, he strode into the next room where Ginevra sat. Do you tell me, he said fiercely, that you have so far forgotten all dignity and propriety as to give a dirty cowboy the encouragement to make you an offer of marriage? The very notion sets my blood boiling. You will make me hate you, you unworthy creature. Pfft, he's lost it, right? Ginevra had turned white, but looking him straight in the face, she answered, if that is a letter for me, you know I have not read it, right? He never gave it to her. He just read it himself and stowed it away in his desk or wherever. There, see for yourself, poetry. He uttered the word with contempt inexpressible. She took the verses from his hand and read them. Even with her father standing there watching her like an inquisitor, she could not help the tears coming in her eyes as she read. There's no such thing here, Papa, she said. They are only verses, bidding me goodbye. And what right has any such fellow to bid my daughter goodbye? Explain that to me, if you please. Of course, I have been for many years aware of your love of low company, but I had hoped as you grew older, you would learn manners. Modesty would have been too much to look for. Oh, he's horrible. He's horribly making, calling her something that she's such a sweet lady. Anyway. If you had nothing to be ashamed of, why did you not tell me of the unpleasant affair? Is not your father your best friend? Oh, why should I make both him and you uncomfortable, Papa, when there was not going to be anything more of it? Why then do you go hankering after him still and refusing Mr. Duff? And refusing Mr. Duff, this Fergus Duff who's at the house right now. Is it true he is not it is true he is not exactly a gentleman by birth, but he is such by education, by manners, by position, by influence. Papa, I have already told Mr. Duff as plainly as I could without being rude that I would never let him talk to me so. What lady would refuse Donald Grant and listen to him? Aw, the poet, Donald Grant, right? He was a poet and a student and far more deeply aware of true spiritual things than Fergus Duff, who couldn't understand what he was preaching at all, right? You are a bold, insolent hussy, cried her father in fresh rage, and leaving the room, rejoined Fergus. They sat silent, both for a while. Then the preacher spoke. Other communications may have since reached her from the same quarter, he said. That is impossible, rejoined the laird. I don't know that, insisted Fergus. There is a foolish, a half-silly companion of his about the town. They call him Sir Gibbie Galbraith. Ginny knows no such person. Indeed, she does. I have seen them together. Oh, you mean the lad the minister adopted, the urchin he took off the streets, Sir Gibbie Galbraith, he repeated sneeringly, but as one reflecting. I do vaguely recall a slanderous rumor in which a certain female connection of the family was hinted at. Yes, that's where the nickname comes from, and you think she keeps up communication with the clown through him? They're calling Donald a clown. He's not, though. I don't say that, sir. I merely think it possible she may see this Gibbie occasionally, and I know he worships the cowboy. It is a positive feature of his foolishness, and I wish it were the worst. Here he goes. Therewith he told what he had heard from Miss Kimball, and what he had seen for himself on the night when he watched Gibbie. Her very blood must be tainted, said her father to himself, but added, from her mother's side, right? Even though her mother had the title, and this guy just married her anyway. And his attacks upon her after that were at least diurnal. It was a relief to his feeling of having wronged her to abuse her with justice. He's horrible, but anyway. For a while she tried hard to convince him that notion of her conduct, or of Gibbie's or of Donald's, was mistaken. He would listen to nothing she said, continually insisting that the only amends for her past was to marry according to his wishes, to give up superstition and poetry and cowboys and dumb rascals, and settle down into a respectable matron, a comfort to the gray hairs she was now bringing with sorrow to the grave. Then Ginevra became absolutely silent. He had taught her that any reply was but a new start for his objurgation, a knife wherewith to puncture a fresh gallbladder of abuse. He stormed at her for her sullenness, but she persisted in her silence, sorely distressed to find how dead her heart seemed growing under his treatment of her. What would at one time have made her utterly miserable now passed over her as one of the billows of a trouble that had to be borne, as one of the throbs of a headache drawing from her scarcely a sigh. She did not understand that, her heaven being dark, she could see no individual cloud against it, that her emotional nature untuned, discord itself had ceased to jar. All right, that's what can happen to us. Chapter LVII, a hidden place from the wind. Gibbie found everything at the Old House in complete order for his reception. Mistress Crawle had been very diligent and promised well for a housekeeper. Looked well, too, in her black satin and lace. With her complexion, she justly flattered herself. Right, she has this beautiful dress now that he got her, and she's serving, and anyway, flattered herself, not a little improved. She had a good meal ready for him, with every adjunct in proper style, during the preparation of which she had reveled in the thought that some day, when she had quite established her fitness for her new position, Sir Gibbie would certainly invite the minister and his lady to dine with him, when she, whom they were too proud to ask to partake of their cocky-leaky soup, right, would show them she knew both what a dinner ought to be and how to preside at it. And the soup, it should be cocky-leaky, right? Anyway, it was a funny part of the story. Everything went comfortably. Gibbie was so well up in mathematics, thanks to Mr. Sclater, that doing all requisite for honourable studentship, but having no desire to distinguish himself, he had plenty of time for more important duty. Now that he was by himself, as if old habit had returned in the shape of new passion, he roamed the streets every night. His custom was this: after dinner, which he had had when he came from college, about 4:30, he lay down, fell asleep in a moment, as he always did, and slept till 6:30. Then he had tea, and after that studied, not dawdled over his book, till 10 o'clock, when he took his Greek Testament. You right, the New Testament is written in Greek originally. Well, and sometimes they spoke in Aramaic. Maybe John was Aramaic written, but got translated to Greek. Anyway, at 11, he went out, seldom finally returning before 1:30, sometimes not for an hour longer, during which time Mistress Crawle was in readiness to receive any guest he might bring home. You know, people on the streets. People on the streets. Da-da-dee-da-dee, da-da-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da. I think I was singing that this morning. I don't know why. It's Under Pressure with David Bowie and Queen. I think that's where it is. The history of the special endeavor he had now commenced does not belong to my narrative. Some nights, many nights together, he would not meet a single wanderer. Occasionally, he would meet 2 or 3 in the same night. When he found one, he would stand regarding him until he spoke. If the man was drunk, he would leave him. Such were not those for whom he could now do most. If he was sober, he made him signs of invitation. If he would not go with him, he left him, but kept him in vain and tried him again. Kept him in view, and tried him again. If still he would not, he gave him a piece of bread and left him. If he called, he stopped, and by circuitous ways brought him to the little house at the back. It was purposefully quite dark. If the man was too apprehensive to enter, he left him. If he followed, he led him to Mistress Croll. If anything suggested the possibility of helping farther, a possibility turning entirely on the person's self, the attempt was set on foot. But in general, after a good breakfast, Gibbie led them through a dark passage into the darkened house and dismissed them from the door by which he had entered. He never gave money and never sought such guests except in the winter, because it's super cold outside, right? He didn't want them dying in the streets. Indeed, he was never in the city in the summer. Before the session was over, they had one woman and one girl and a fair way of honest livelihood, and one small child whose mother had an infant besides and was evidently dying. He had sent in a present to Janet by the hand of Mistress Murkison. Sent in a present. Altogether, it was a tolerable beginning, and during the time, not a word reached him indicating knowledge of his proceedings, although within a week or two a rumor was rife in the lower parts of the city of a mysterious being who went about doing this and that for poor folk, but notwithstanding his gifts was far from canny. Like, they think he's an idiot, but he's not. He's super smart, and he knows how to do sign language with his hands, but they don't know it. Anyway, Fergus had now, with his father's help, established himself in the manse of Northchurch, and thither he invited Mr. and Miss Galbraith to dine with him on a certain evening. Her father's absolute desire compelled Ginevra's assent. She could not, while with him, rebel absolutely. Fergus did his best to make the evening a pleasant one, and had special satisfaction in showing the laird that he could provide both a good dinner and a good bottle of port. Two of his congregation, a young lawyer and his wife, were the only other guests. The laird found the lawyer an agreeable companion, chiefly from his readiness to listen to his old law stories, and Fergus laid himself out to please the two ladies, secure of the admiration of one. He hoped it might help to draw the favor of the other, Ginevra, right? But she's not falling for it. He had conceived the notion that Ginevra probably disliked his profession, and took pains, therefore, to show how much he was a man of the world, which she does not want. Come here, Leia. Come here. Come here. Come here. I got you. Good girl. Good girl. I'll bring Leia over. She'll do her cameo. Da-da-dee-da-da. There she goes. Maybe I'll see if she'll go up here for us, so we have something to watch besides the swings. Lele, will you sit up here? Will you sit up here? Good girl. Good girl. Good girl. Good girl. All right. Sorry about the little. Okay. Stay. Good girl. You gonna clean off my shoulder for me? Okay. And so, he talked about Shakespeare and flaunted rags of quotations in elocutionary style. It was cut up, the word was. Got books from his study and read passages from Byron, Shelley, and Moore, chiefly from The Loves of the Angels. Of the last, exercising the lawyer's lady and interesting Ginevra, though all he read, taken together, seemed to her unworthy of comparison with one of poor Donald's songs that he would make up himself, right? Dee-da-dee-da-dee-da. It grew late. The dinner had been at a fashionable hour. They had stayed an unfashionable time. It was nearly 12 o'clock when guests and host left the house in company. The lawyer and his wife went one way, and Fergus went the other with the laird and Ginevra, to walk them home. And hearing the pitiful wailing of a child and the cough of a woman as they went along a street bridge, they peeped over the parapet and saw upon the stair leading to the lower street a woman with a child asleep in her lap, trying to eat a piece of bread and coughing as if in the last stages of the last stage of consumption. On the next step below sat a man, hushing in his bosom the baby, whose cry they had heard. Watch what this is. They stood for a moment, the minister pondering whether his profession required of him action, and Ginevra gazed fixed on the head and shoulders of the foreshortened figure of the man, who vainly as patiently sought to soothe the child by gentle rocking it to and fro, right? He was rocking the baby. Guess who it is? But when he began a strange humming song to it, which brought all Glashgar before her eyes, Ginevra knew beyond a doubt that it was Gibbie, because he couldn't speak, but he could make a certain humming noise, right? Singing. At that sound, the child ceased to wail, and presently the woman with difficulty rose, laying a hand for help on Gibbie's shoulder. Where are you going, Leia? You going to get down? All right, she was there for a second. Gibbie rose, also cradling the infant on his left arm and making signs to the mother to place the child on his right. She did so, and turning, went feebly up the stair. Gibbie followed with the two children, one lying on his arm and other with his head on his shoulder, both wretched and pining, with gray cheeks, right, because they're so hungry and stuff, and dark hollows under their eyes. From the top of the stair, they went slowly up the street, the poor woman coughing, and Gibbie crooning to the baby, who cried no more, but now and then moaned. Then Fergus said to the laird, "Did you see that young man, sir? That is the so-called Sir Gilbert Galbraith we were talking of the other night. They say he has come into a good property, but you may judge for yourself whether he seems fit to manage it." Ginevra withdrew her hand from his arm. "Good God, Ginny!" exclaimed the laird. "You do not mean to tell me you have ever spoken to a young man like that?" "I know him very well, papa," replied Ginevra collectedly. "You are incomprehensible, Ginny. If you know him, why do I not know him? If you had not known good reason to be ashamed of him, you would one time or other have mentioned his name in my hearing. I ask you and I demand an answer." Watch this, right? Here he stopped and fronted her. "Why have you concealed from me your acquaintance with this person?" "Because I thought it might be painful to you, papa," she answered, looking in his face. "Painful to me? Why should it be painful to me, except indeed that it breaks my heart as often as I see you betray your invincible fondness for low company?" Wow. "Do you desire me to tell you, papa, why I thought it might be painful to you to make that young man's acquaintance?" "I do distinctly. I command you." "Then I will." Ready? "That young man, Sir Gilbert Galbraith." "Nonsense, girl. There is no such Galbraith. It is the merest of scoffs." Ginevra did not care to argue with him this point. In truth, she knew a little more about it than he. "Many years ago," she recommenced, "when I was a child, excuse me, Mr. Duff, but it is quite time I told my father what has been weighing upon my mind for so many years." "Sir Gilbert," muttered her father contemptuously. "One day," again she began, "Mr. Fergus Duff brought a ragged little boy to Glashruach, the most innocent and loving of creatures, who had committed no crime but that of doing good in secret," right? He had been doing all the work at the farmhouse. Anyway, "I saw Mr. Duff box his ears on the bridge, and you, papa, gave him over to that wretch Angus MacPhilp to whip him. So at least Angus told me, after he had whipped him till he dropped senseless. I can hardly keep from screaming now when I think of it. All this, Ginny, is nothing less than cursed folly. Do you mean to tell me you have all these years been cherishing resentment against your own father for the sake of a little thieving rascal, whom it was a good deed to fright from the error of his ways? I have no doubt Angus gave him merely what he deserved." Wow. "You must remember, Miss Galbraith, we did not know he was dumb," said Fergus humbly, that he couldn't speak, right? They kept going, "Why aren't you speaking?" And they'd whip him more. It was horrible. "If you had any heart," said Ginevra, "you would have seen in his face that he was a perfect angelic child. He ran to the mountains without a rag to cover his bleeding body, and would have died of cold and hunger, but not for the grants the parents of your father's herd boy, Mr. Duff, taking them to their hearts, and been father and mother to him. Ginevra's mouth was opened at last. After that, she went on, Angus, that bad man, shot him like a wild beast when he was quietly herding Robert Grant's sheep. In return, Sir Gilbert saved his life in the flood, and just before the house of Glashruach fell, the part in which my room was, he caught me up because he could not speak and carried me out of it. And when I told you that he had saved my life, you ordered him out of the house, and when he was afraid to leave me alone with you, dashed him against the wall and sent for Angus to whip him again. But I should have liked to see Angus try it then. She's like, that wasn't going to happen. I do remember an insolent fellow taking advantage of the ruinous state of the house that this house was in to make his way into my study, said the laird. And now, Ginevra continued, Mr. Duff makes question of his wits because he finds him carrying a poor woman's children, going to get them a bed somewhere, right? A frozen woman with children. If Mr. Duff had run about the streets when he was a child like Sir Gilbert, he might not perhaps think it so strange he should care about a houseless woman and her brats, like her little babies, right? Therewith Ginevra burst into tears. Abominably disagreeable, muttered the laird, her dad, right? I always thought she was an idiot. Hold your tongue, Ginny. You will wake the street. All you say may or may not be quite true. I do not say you are telling lies or even exaggerating, but I see nothing in it to prove the lad a fit companion for a young lady. Very much to the contrary, I suppose he told you he was your injured, neglected, ill-used cousin. He may be your cousin. You may have any number of such cousins, if half the low tales concerning your mother's family be true. Oh, her mother was grand. Leia, come back over here. Come here. Come sit here. Come back here. Good girl. Good girl. Come here. Come here. Good girl. Why don't you sit up here? Is it not leaning on anything? Here, let's let you lean on me. Lean on me when you're not strong. I'll be your friend. She likes being next to. All right, I'll lower this a little so we can watch something sometimes. That's usually I'm outside. We can. Oh, I have a little light that's brightening up the room. I forgot to turn the lights on. Anyway, there you go. There you go. I don't need licks. All right. Okay, and so Ginevra did not answer him, did not speak another word. When Fergus left them at their own door, she neither shook hands with him nor bade him good night. Right? He's not standing up for her at whatsoever. Ginny, except for saying we didn't know that he couldn't speak, right? Ginny, said her father, the moment he was gone, if I hear of your once speaking again to that low vagabond, and now I think of it, he cried, interrupting himself with a sudden recollection, there was a cobbler fellow in the town here they used to call Sir Somebody Galbraith. That must be his father. Whether the Sir was the title or a nickname, I neither know nor care. A title without money is as bad as a saintship without grace. Oh my gosh, right? But this I tell you, that if I hear of your speaking one word, good or bad, to the fellow again, I swear to Almighty God, I will turn you out of the house. We'll watch, because, she might want to be turned out. To Ginevra's accumulated misery, she carried with her to her room a feeling of contempt for her father, with which she lay struggling in vain half the night, right? Not wanting to carry it. Okay, chapter LVII. Is that 58? I'm not sure. The confession. Anyway, although Gibbie had taken no notice of the laird's party, he had recognized each of the three as he came up the stair, and in Ginevra's face read an appeal for deliverance. Yes, right? It seemed to say, you help everybody but me. Why do you not come and help me too? Am I to have no pity because I am neither hungry nor cold? He did not, however, lie awake the most of the night, or indeed a single hour of it, thinking what he should do. Long before the poor woman and her child were in bed, he had made up his mind, right? Leia, what are you looking at, As soon as he came home from college the next day and had hastily eaten his dinner, going upon his vague knowledge of law business lately acquired, he bought a stamped paper, wrote upon it, and put it in his pocket. Then he took a card and wrote on it, Sir Gilbert Galbraith, Baronet of Glashruach, and put that in his pocket also. Thus provided, and having said to Mistress Croll that he should not be home that night, for he expected to set off almost immediately in search of Donald, and had bespoken horses, he walked deliberately along Pearl Street, out into the suburb, and turning to the right, rang the bell at the garden gate of the laird's cottage. When the girl came, he gave her his card and followed her into the house, like he wasn't going to take no. She carried it into the room where, dinner over, the laird and the preacher were sitting with a bottle of the same port which had pleased the laird at the manse between them. Giving time, as he judged, and no more, to read the card, Gibbie entered the room. He would not risk a refusal to see him, so he just walked right after the introduction. It was a small room with a round table. The laird sat sideways to the door. The preacher sat between the table and the fire. "What the devil does this mean? A vengeance take him!" cried the laird. His big, tumbling eyes had required more time than Gibbie had allowed, so that when this exclamation had lifted them from the card, they fell upon the object of his imprecation, standing in the middle of the room between him and the open door. The preacher, snug behind the table, scarcely endeavoured to conceal the smile with which he took no notice of Sir Gilbert. The laird rose in perturbation of mingled anger and unpreparedness. "Ah," he said, but it was only a sound, not a word. "To what, may I ask, have I not the honour of your acquaintance, Mr. Here he looked again at the card he held, fumbled for and opened a double eyeglass, then with deliberation examined the name upon it, and thus gaining time by rudeness and gathering his force for more, while Gibbie remained as unembarrassed as if he had been standing to his tailor for his measure. He just stood there, right? Mr. I see Galbraith. He's not calling him sir, even though. Leia. Oh, good. She's sitting still. All right. Okay. Such an unusual hour for making a business call. For business, I presume, it must be that brings you, seeing I have not the honor of the slightest acquaintance with you. He dropped his eyeglasses with a clatter against his waistcoat, threw the card into his finger-glass, raised his pale eyes, and stared at Sir Gilbert with all the fixedness they were capable of. She's over here now. Come here, Lily. Here, this is where she sits usually. Good girl. All right, good girl. Well, we don't really get to see her because then it'll be like cutting out my head. Okay. Oh, I think I can. Anyway. All right. Wow. So, with all the fixedness they were capable of, he had already drunk a good deal of wine, and it was plain he had, although he was far from being overcome by it. Gibbie answered by drawing from his breast pocket of his coat the paper he had written and presenting it like a petition. Mr. Galbraith sneered and would not have touched it had not his eye caught the stamp, which from old habit at once drew his hand. From similar habit, or perhaps to get it nearer the light, he sat down. Gibbie stood, and Fergus stared at him with insolent composure. The laird read, but not aloud. "I, Gilbert Galbraith, Baronet, hereby promise and undertake to transfer to Miss Galbraith, only daughter of Thomas Galbraith, Esquire, on the day when she shall be married to Donald Grant, Master of the Arts," like who already got his master's in school, right? "The whole of the title deeds of the house and the lands of Glashruach, to have and to hold as hers, with absolute power to dispose of the same as she may see fit. Gilbert Galbraith, old house of Galbraith, Whitty Hill, March, etc., etc. The laird scratched his neck like a turkey cock and gobbled inarticulately through the paper to Fergus and turned on his chair, glowered at Gibbie. Then suddenly starting to his feet, he cried, "What do you mean, you rascal, by daring to insult me in my own house? Dang your," he says something else, "your insolent foolery." And just in case there's kids around, but if George MacDonald wrote it, he's just saying that this is how this man's speaking. "A trick, a most palpable trick, an exceedingly silly one," pronounced Fergus, who had now read the paper, "quite as foolish as unjustifiable. Everybody knows Glashruach is the property of Major Colsamon." Here the laird sought the relief of another oath or two. "I entreat you to moderate your anger, my dear sir," Fergus resumed. "The thing is hardly worth so much indignation. Some animal has been playing the poor fellow an ill-natured trick, putting him up to it for the sake of a vile practical joke. It is exceedingly provoking, but you must forgive him. He is hardly to blame, scarcely accountable under the natural circumstances. Get away with you," he added, addressing Gibbie across the table. "Make haste, before worse comes of it. You have been made a fool of." When Fergus began to speak, the laird turned, and while he spake, stared at him with lackluster yet gleaming eyes until he addressed Gibbie, when he turned on him again as fiercely as before. Poor Gibbie stood shaking his head, smiling, and making eager signs with his hands and arms. But in the laird's condition of both heart and brain, he might well forget and fail to be reminded that Gibbie was dumb, like he couldn't speak, deaf and dumb, but he's not deaf. He can hear. He just can't speak. I keep doing this so I get the mic. All right. "Why don't you speak, you fool?" he cried. "Get out, and don't stand making faces there. Be off with you, or I will knock you down with a decanter." Gibbie pointed to the paper, which lay before Fergus, and placed a hand first on his lips and then on his heart, right, to say this is true. "Dang your mummery." He says something else, but I'm just going to say dang. Said the laird, choking with rage. "Go away, or by God I will break your head." Fergus at this rose and came round the table to get between them. But the laird caught up a pair of nutcrackers and threw them at Gibbie. It struck him on the forehead, and the blood spirted from the wound. He staggered backwards. Fergus seized the laird's arm and sought to pacify him, because he might faint from the blood loss. Because when you get it caught in the head, it bleeds a lot. Her father's loud tones had reached Ginevra in her room. She ran down, and that instant entered. Gibbie all but fell into her arms. The moment's support she gave him and the look of loving terror she cast in his face restored him, and he was again firm on his feet, pressing her handkerchief to his forehead, when Fergus, leaving the laird, advanced with the specific, maybe the S got cut out? It's not there. Intention of getting him safe from the house. Ginevra stepped between them. Her father's rage thereupon broke loose quite, and was madness. He seized hold of her with violence and dragged her from the room. Fergus laid his hands upon Gibbie more gently, and half would have forced, half persuaded him to go. A cry came from Ginevra, refusing to be sent to her room before Gibbie was in safety. Her father struck her. Gibbie would have darted to help her. Fergus held him fast, but knew nothing of Gibbie's strength. He was so strong. And the next moment found himself on his back upon the table amidst the crash of wine glasses and china. Having locked the door, Gibbie sprung to the laird, who was trying to drag his daughter, now hardly resisting, up the first step of the stair, took him round the waist from behind, swept him to the other room, and there locked him up also. He then returned to Ginevra, where she lay motionless on the stair, lifted her in his arms, and carried her out of the house. Nor stopped until, having reached the farther end of the street, he turned the corner of it into another quiet street, right? The laird and Fergus, when they were released by the girl from their respective prisons, the girl that worked at the house, right, and found that the enemy was gone, imagined that Ginevra had retired again to her room, and what they did after is not interesting. Under a dull, smoky oil lamp, Gibbie stopped. He knew by the tightening of her arms that Ginevra was coming to herself. "Let me down," she said feebly. He did so, but kept his arm around her. She gave a deep sigh and gazed bewildered. When she saw him, she smiled. "With you, Gibbie," she murmured. "But they will be after us." "They shall not touch you," signified Gibbie. She knew how to read the letters, right? "What was it all about?" she asked. Gibbie spelled it on his fingers. "Because I offered to give you Glashruach if your father would let you marry Donald." "Gibbie, how could you?" she cried, almost in a scream, and pushing away his arm, turned from him and tried to run, but after 2 steps tottered to the lamppost and leaned against it with such a scared look. "Then come with me and be my sister, Ginevra, and I will take care of you," spelled Gibbie. "I can do nothing to take care of you while I can't get near you." "Oh, Gibbie, nobody does like that," returned Ginevra. "Else I should be so glad." She would be glad to be his sister, right? "There is no other way, then, that I know. You won't marry anybody you see. Won't I, Gibbie? What makes you think that?" Watch. I'm going to cry. Returned. Won't I? What makes you think that? "Because, of course, you would never refuse Donald and marry anybody else. That is not possible." "Oh, don't tease me, Gibbie. Ginevra, you don't mean you would..." In the dull light and with the imperfect means of Gibbie for the embodiment of his thoughts, Ginevra misunderstood him. "Yes, Gibbie," she said, "I would. I thought it was understood between us ever since that day you found me on Glashgar. In my thoughts, I have been yours all the time," right? He saved her life. And she had pretty much saved his from making Angus stop whipping him when he was a boy. She turned her face to the lamppost, but Gibbie made her look. "You do not mean," he spelled very hurriedly, "that you would marry me? Me? I never dreamed of such a thing." You didn't mean it then?" said Ginevra with a cry, bitter but feeble with despair, because she thought he was asking her, right? She would have never confessed, right? And ending in a stifled shriek. "What have I been saying then? I thought I belonged to you. I thought you meant to take me all this time." She burst into an agony of sobbing. "Oh, me, I have been alone all the time and did not know it." She sank on the pavement at the foot of the lamppost, weeping sorely and shaking with her sobs. Gibbie was in sad perplexity. Heaven had opened before his gaze. Its colors filled his eyes. Its sounds filled his ears and heart and brain. But the portress was busy crying and would not open the door. Neither could he get at her to comfort her, for her eyes were being wanted to cry with. His poor signs were of no use. Dumbness is a drawback to the gift of consolation, right? It was a calm night, early in March, clear overhead, and the heaven full of stars. The first faint, thick odor of spring was in the air. A crescent moon hung halfway between the zenith and the horizon, clear as silver in firelight, and peaceful in the consciousness that not much was required of her yet. Both bareheaded, the one stood under the lamp, the other had fallen in a heap at its foot. The one was in the 7th paradise and knew it. The other was weeping her heart out, yet was in the same paradise if she would but have opened her eyes, right? Sometimes you just need to look up. I have a friend in my life, and he always says, just keep your chin up, in the worst of times. But it's helped me so much, right? Keep looking up. And there's verses like that. And even Gandalf says it. "I shall come at the dawn on the 3rd day," like Jesus raising from the dead on the 3rd day. And I lift my eyes up unto the mountains. Where doth my help come from? It comes from thee, the God of heaven. It's in the Psalms, I think, right? They made a song of it. But anyway, Gibbie held one of her hands and stroked it. Then he pulled off his coat, laid it softly upon her. She grew a little quieter. "Take me home, Gibbie," she said in a gentle voice. All was over. There was no use in crying or even in thinking any more. Gibbie put his arms round her and helped her to her feet. She looked at him and saw a face glorious with bliss. Never, not even on Glashgar, in the skin coat of the Beast Boy, had she seen him so like an angel, right? He was so happy. And in his eyes was that which triumphed not over dumbness, but over speech. It brought the rose fire rushing into her wan cheeks. She hid her face on his bosom, right? Under the dingy red flame of the dingy red flame of the lamp in the stony street. They held each other as blessed as if they had been under an orange tree haunted with fireflies, for they knew each the heart of the other, and God is infinite. How long they stood thus, neither of them knew. The lady would not have spoken if she could, and the youth could not if he would. But the lady shivered, and because she shivered, she would have the youth take his coat. He mocked at cold. He's like, I'm not taking that from you, right? He had been so cold in his life so many times. He made her put her arms in the sleeves and buttoned it round her. Both laughed to see how wide it was. Then he took her by the hand and led her away, obedient, as when first he found her and her heart upon Glashgar, right, to save her life from the flood that would happen that took half the castle down, or half the building. Like two children, holding each other fast, they hurried along in dread of pursuit. He brought her to Daurside and gave her into Mrs. Sclater's arms. Ginevra told her everything except that her father had struck her, and Gibbie begged her to keep his wife for him till they could be married, right? So they were engaged. Mrs. Sclater behaved like a mother to them, sent Gibbie away and Ginevra to a hot bath and to bed. Oh, I could cry for an hour. Dostoevsky says, in the end, the world will be saved by beauty. There's so much beauty in this story. Look, we've got hardly anything left. I don't know if we'll finish, but I'm going out of town, so I might just finish it and post it, or I don't know, we'll see. Chapter LIX. Is that 59? Yes, I think. Gibbie went, it's called Catastrophe, we'll see. Gibbie went home as if Pearl Street had been the stairs of Glashgar, and the old house was a mansion in the heavens. He seemed to float along the way as one floats in a happy dream, where motion is born at once of the will, without the intermediating mechanics of nerve, muscle, and fulcrum. Love had been gathering and ever storing itself in his heart so many years. For this brown dove, right? She would always wear like brown and had brown hair, I think. And anyway, now at last the rock was smitten and its treasure rushed forth to her service, and nothing was it changed as it issued, save as the dark, silent, motionless water of the cavern changes into the sparkling singing, dancing rivulet. Gibbie's was love simple, unselfish, undemanding, not merely asking for no return, but asking for no recognition, requiring not even that its existence should be known. He was a rare one who did not make the common miserable blunder of taking the shadow cast by love, the desire, namely, to be loved, for love itself. Right? That's transactional love. That's not agape love. Jesus loves us with agape love. That's what it is. In 1 Corinthians 13, love is patient, is kind, does not envy, it does not boast, it keeps no record of wrongs. It's, not easily puffed up. It, not easily angered, It's not puffed up at all. Anyway, for love was a vertical sun, and his own shadow was under his feet. Silly youths and maidens count themselves martyrs of love when they are but the pining witness to a delicious and entrancing selfishness. But do not mistake me through confounding on the other hand the desire to be loved, which is neither wrong nor noble, any more than hunger is either wrong or noble. And the delight in being loved, to be devoid of which a man must be lost in an immeasurably deeper, and an evil, ruinous, yea, a fiendish selfishness. Not to care for love is the still worse reaction from the self-foiled and outworn greed of love, right? When people greed for it and then keep doing it the wrong way, and then they hate it. That's disastrous as well, you say. Gibbie's love was a diamond among gem loves, right? Gem, like among other people who has merely gems compared to a diamond. There are men whose love to a friend is less selfish than their love to the dearest woman, but Gibbie's was not a love to be less divine towards a woman than towards a man. One man's love is as different from another's as to one is himself different from the other. The love that dwells in the one man is an angel. The love in another is a bird. That in another is a hog, like a big swine, a pig. Some would count worthless the love of a man who loved everybody. There would be no distinction in being loved by such a man, and distinction as a guarantee of their own great worth is what such seek. There are women who desire to be the sole object of a man's affection and are all their lives devoured by unlawful jealousies, unfortunately, right? A love that had never gone forth upon human being but themselves would be to them the treasure to sell all that they might buy. And the man who brought such a love might in truth be all absorbed therein himself. The poorest of creatures may well be absorbed in the poorest of loves. A heart has to be taught to love, and its first lesson, however well learnt, no more makes it perfect in love than the ABC makes a savant, a genius. The man who loves most will love best. The man who thoroughly loves God and his neighbor is the only man who will love a woman ideally, who can love her with the love God thought of between them when he made male and female. The man, I repeat, who loves God with his very life and his neighbor as Christ loves him, is the man who alone is capable of grand, perfect, glorious love to any woman. Thank you, Jesus, right? Because Gibbie's love was towards everything human, he was able to love Ginevra as Donald, poet and prophet, was not yet grown able to love her. Hold on, I've got to get, I have a Kleenex in here because, a handkerchief, right? Because, excuse me, I get teary-eyed sometimes from such a beautiful story. So I just brought it with me. Up the mountain, because I usually read up the mountain, or the hill, whatever you want to call it. All right, so because Gibbie's love was towards everything human, he was able to love Ginevra as Donald, poet and prophet, was not yet grown able to love her. To that of the most passionate of unbelieving lovers, Gibbie's love was as the fire of a sun to that of a forest. The fullness of a world of love ways and love thoughts was Gibbie's. In sweet affairs of loving kindness, he was in his own kingdom and sat upon its throne. And it was this essential love, acknowledging and embracing as a necessity of its being everything that could be loved, which now concentrated its rays on the individual's individual. His love to Ginevra stood like a growing thicket of aromatic shrubs until her confession set the fire of heaven to it, and the flame that consumes not, like the burning bush where God appeared to Moses, but gives life, arose and shot homeward. He had never imagined, never hoped, never desired she should love him like that. She had refused his friend, the strong, the noble, the beautiful Donald, the poet, and it never could but from her own lips have found way to his belief that she had turned her regard upon wee Sir Gibbie, right? A nobody who to himself was a mere burning heart, running about in tattered garments. His devotion to her had forestalled every pain. With its antidote of perfect love, had negatived every lack, had precluded every desire, had shut all avenues of entrance against self. Even if a little thought unsound should have chanced upon an entrance, it would have found no soil to root and grow in. The soil for the harvest of pain is that brought down from the peaks of pride by the torrents of desire. Immeasurably the greater, therefore, was his delight when the warmth and odor of the love that had been from time to him immemorial, passing out from him in virtue of consolation and healing, came back upon him in the softest and sweetest of flower-waking spring winds. Right? Then indeed was his heart a bliss worth God's making, the sum of happiness in the city, if gathered that night into one wave, could not have reached halfway to the crest of the mighty billow, tossing itself heavenward as it rushed along the ocean of Gibbie's spirit. Let me see. So there's about 20 pages left. And yeah, we've read less than that. So, all right. This might take 1 more hour. I plan to finish it in the next video. So stay tuned. Make sure to like and share this with like-minded people. I hope you got so much. We learn all about what real love is, and God has this love for us. I just keep posting these videos about this divine union back with God, how we came out of love and we have this desire to be back in it. And it's like singularity or non-dualism, but in a way. Meister Eckhart speaks about it. And a guy named John Butler, who's a strong Christian, who's meditated on the Jesus prayer for like 30 years and meditated for 50 years total. He's like 80 something, or maybe he's meditated more than that. Since his 20s, he talks about this stuff. Anyway, we just got the explanation of the love of that kind. Of course, George MacDonald knew it well. I wish you so much love. I hope this resonated with your heart and your remembrance of the real love that we're all meant to live within. Jesus said in John 15, I think it's verse 9, he says, it's the I am the vine, you are the branches. He says, remain in my love, abide in it, remain in my love. Make sure to remain in my love, right? What does that mean? I love reading about it. All right, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks so much. Watch the other ones if you'd like. Much love.